For 20 years, Rick Larsen has been a useless member of Congress, theoretically representing the 2nd Congressional District in the state of Washington. By useless, I mean in the sense that you can't find a single initiative that he took the lead on and worked hard to pass in his entire 20 years in Congress. His best claim to fame might be that there isn't a corporate dollar he hasn't been willing to pocket, from defense contractors to healthcare companies to big tech companies like Amazon and Google to planet polluters like big oil companies. He is Mr. Corporate PAC Money. So he's not just useless, actually, to regular people. He's a downright cancer, shilling repeatedly for big money and big corporations. Jason Call is taking on Larsen in the Democratic primary for the seat in 2022. A longtime activist, Jason casts his campaign in this light, as he says on his website, callforcongress.com, and I'm quoting now, "Good government is possible when we rein in the undue influence of giant corporations and directly challenge their power. Together, I believe we can prevent them from continuing to write laws that massively benefit the wealthy to the detriment of everyone else." End quote. That sounds pretty good, huh? And Jason joins me now to talk more about his campaign. I have to say that right off the bat, Jason, I'm impressed with your setup there. You look like a professional podcaster or radio guy.
Thank you. You know, in the Zoom age, and especially as a candidate now, you get offered enough opportunity to do this that it's really worth the investment to get a pro setup. So yeah, here we are.
So you are running for Congress. What got into you that made you decide to give up probably a great life? You're a husband, you're a father, you're a musician, you do lots of interesting things. Why did you decide to go this crazy route of running for office?
It is a little bit crazy, yes. Well, I mean, I have a history of as an activist. I've been an anti-war activist 30 years. I protested as a freshman, sophomore at the University of Washington, protested the first Iraq war with Desert Storm. And I think once you get that activist bug and you are become aware of injustices coming from being a sheltered child, and you get out into the world, as I did in college, and you realize how much injustice there is in the world, and you get that bug that you want to fight back, and it never leaves you. But so, I've done activism for a long time, didn't really get into the political side of it until I was inspired by Howard Dean back in 2003. And so started to get into electoral politics more around then, supportive of Dennis Kucinich and, certainly Bernie Sanders. I think it was really the Bernie Sanders bug. I see the book behind you, but, Bernie has inspired so many people, but, he kind of put it on us as activists to go be that change. And I've been oppositional to the congressman here in Washington, who is a Democrat, very conservative Democrat. I've been oppositional to him since he signed on to the Bankruptcy Act in 2005. And I people have challenged him from the left in the past and have not really done a great job of it because he's got a lot of establishment institutional support. And it really came down to having that inspiration to say, and other people getting behind me and saying, you're the right person to do this. I don't know that I would have chosen to do it myself, but other people pushed me into it. And so here we are, we're taking on the fight for justice.
And we'll get to your opponent in a moment. You did mention the Bankruptcy Act, and I just want to remind my audience that Joe Biden was one of the main sponsors of the Bankruptcy Act as a promoter and, if I can say, a shill for the credit card industry back in the days when he was the United States Senator. I don't want to go down that path. I don't want to go down that path right now. Just because it's a distraction. I want to focus on you.
Sure.
You have a completely progressive agenda, and there are 2 or 3 points I want to pull out from your agenda to focus on because you have a particularly unique take on them that I haven't necessarily found with other candidates. The first thing that I saw, which I compliment you for, is a lot of people have been talking about raising the federal minimum wage, and they've talked about raising it to $15 an hour. And that's been a great hue and cry and a great campaign. And obviously, that's a whole lot better than the pathetic $7.25 an hour that folks are getting now. But as I've pointed out in this program repeatedly, that even at $15 an hour, if you work 52 weeks a year, 40 hours a week, you would still, if you were a family of four, just be above the poverty level, just barely. And so you actually call for, to start from, you call for a $20 an hour minimum wage. And you're totally right about this. It should be much higher. Give me your thinking behind that.
Well, I think anybody who works, I mean, it deserves a living wage, and I don't even want to say anybody who works because I'm supportive of UBI. Also, I think everybody deserves a living income. I think about my disabled friends who are unable to work, and they deserve dignity in living also. But $20 an hour is not even enough. I think last year when we ran, we certainly looked at 15 and said 15 is insufficient. Yes, it would be nice to have. $20 is sort of that $5 incremental, but realistically, we should be making somewhere around $25 to $27 an hour. If we go back to wages, and I'm not sure where the index is, I want to say it's around 1968. But if we index things from there, where we are right now is that the working class has lost ground in their income by comparison. So I want to make sure that anybody who goes out and puts the time into a job is going to get fairly compensated for it with a living wage. And you can't live anywhere in this country reasonably. You certainly can't raise a family. If we want to talk about family values, income has to be part of that equation.
So, yes, you're correct that if you look at productivity going back about 4 decades, the minimum wage should be around $22, $23 an hour at least, just to start from. And essentially, workers have been robbed of the sweat of the brow for that long by many companies, not just those in the fast food industry. Now, you mentioned universal basic income, which was, in fact, something else I wanted to raise. Now, that's a little bit controversial. And what I mean by controversial, even in progressive circles, it's a little bit controversial. Andrew Yang has adopted it. I'm not necessarily considering him a progressive. He's kind of a libertarian from my point of view, though a very smart guy. I like listening to him because you can tell, unlike 99% of the politicians, that there's something going on upstairs, which is refreshing. So give me your, if I can say, elevator speech on universal basic income, and specifically how much would it be? Because you don't cite a specific figure in your proposal.
You know what? I don't know that I can put my number on a figure. I mean, that would be something for us to sit down around a table and talk about what is a reasonable amount. But what I would say about it is, one of the things that I would caution about UBI, first of all, I think everybody deserves a basic income level. What I would not want to see happen, and this goes to a lot of other policies, is that we see increases in the price of rent. I don't want UBI to become essentially a direct transfer of payment to landlords. So we need to have things like rent control. We need to make sure that we are controlling costs on healthcare. So UBI in conjunction with Medicare for all, a federal jobs guarantee, that I think it's part of the whole package.
And that's the point, actually, that lots of folks, and I consider myself in that group, skeptical of UBI, are concerned that it wouldn't just be a transfer to landlords. It would be a reasoning for the deficit hawks and those folks who cry about government spending to say, well, we're giving people UBI now so we can cut over here, say, unemployment insurance.
Exactly. We can't let the capitalists control the messaging around UBI. And really, I consider myself an MMT adherent. Also, I've done a number of podcasts with some MMT economists, modern monetary theory. And I fully believe that we have the entire picture of economics backwards. Being that the federal government is the sole issuer of our currency. So I would encourage your listeners, if they are not aware of MMT, to really look into that as a way to fight back against these deficit hawks, because really, as Stephanie Kelton said, the deficit is a myth. Our government, the capitalists in our government choose to spend money on war whenever they want to. They are fine with tax cuts for the rich, knowing very well that that just is a way to increase income inequality, so that the top 1% has more power. It's really about power. So, it's one of the things about progressive policies that you really have to address them all kind of at the same time. It's like a big package of things.
Mm-hmm. And last, in your policy proposals, you have something interesting. I haven't seen this from other progressive candidates. You want to create a national solidarity fund funded by a 1 cent per worker hour tax, paying stipends to workers who are striking or locked out. What's your idea behind that?
I think there's a lot of reticence, and I was as a teacher for almost 20 years. I was a union worker. I was a union activist, a building rep. I was on the board of my local for a number of years. I was a rep to our state assembly for a number of years. And when we talk about strike actions and the need for strike actions, there is always the economic impact on the striking workers themselves. And what are we going to do about that? Now, I happen to believe the right to strike is a fundamental workers' right. But if people are going to be impacted economically, then they're going to be reticent to do that. And so that's really the impetus by saying, you know what, just as a support of labor rights and workers' rights, that there should be some assistance when workers are essentially being abused by management in terms of, whatever it is, working conditions or salary or whatever. To have that fund there would be really the reason, to give workers that freedom.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's turn just briefly to your opponent, who is one of the worst conservative Democrats, corporate-funded Democrats in the House, Rick Larsen. And you put together a very interesting table, very interesting website sheet that has all of his contributions and the folks who are financing him, the tech overlords, the fossil fuel guzzlers, the war machine, the climate criminals. I know you like these subtle headlines. Give us the big picture of who Rick Larsen is. And as important, do you think that the folks who have been voting for him understand where his money's coming from and understand that that money is undermining their own standard of living?
So Rick came from a lobbying background. He was a Washington State Dental Association lobbyist here in Washington. And if you know anything about our politics here in Washington, the dental lobby is actually one of the most powerful lobbies in the state. They are definitely in the ears of our state legislators. He was funded for the county that I live in, Snohomish County in Washington. He was funded by the lobbying industry to get a county council seat. He did half a term on that seat before the lobbying industry again elevated him to an open seat in Congress for District 2. Since then, he has gotten 75% of his funding from corporate sources. As you mentioned on my website, Rick's Receipts, we've got it all broken down. 51% of that, if I have the number correct, comes directly from corporate PACs. The other, 25% to get you up to the 75% comes from individuals who have maxed out, but they are, when you look at their titles, they are CEOs, they are managers, they are executives. And you go back and you look, and there are people from the dental industry, people from the fossil fuel industry, people from the banking industry. Less than 5% of his donors are what you would consider small donors, giving less than $200 to his campaign in a cycle. So, he is truly in the pockets of the corporations, in particular the fossil fuel industry, the defense industry, and the banking industry. So, do I really think, and he votes that way. I mean, he has voted to deregulate Dodd-Frank. He has voted to repeal the estate tax. He has voted, as you saw, for the bankruptcy bill. These are classic Larsen votes. So I want to say a little bit more about him in terms of his effectiveness as a legislator. Of all of the Democrats who got elected in 2000, he has the least amount of floor speaking time of all of them who are still there. He hasn't gotten a bill through committee since 2000. I mean, a bill signed into legislation since 2013. He hangs his environmental hat on a 2008 piece of legislation that was wilderness preservation here in Washington, and yet he's trying to rebrand himself as a grassroots environmentalist. He got nothing out of committee in the. I mean, he's very in the last.
Yeah, his fingerprints are not to be seen in Congress. So let me now transfer the conversation a little bit to the voters then.
Exactly.
Because you have to obviously take that away from the inner circle of those people who pay attention to someone who, in fact, has very light fingerprints and very low visibility. How do you convince voters to basically throw an incumbent like that out of office?
It's a challenge because, but I want to say in this district is doable. First of all, we have a pretty environmentally active district. I mean, we have people in our district who are very concerned about pollution, about rising tides. Here in this district, we got a lot of coastline. We're going to be impacted in the future by global warming more than many in the country. So. What we do is I am involved in the local Democratic Party. I have been for a number of years. Last year, we got 7 endorsements out of the 14 local Democratic parties here. We're going to go through the endorsement processes. It's always an opportunity to talk to the people. I happen to be the parliamentarian of my local legislative district, Democrats. And so, I'm a known quantity. And what I've heard back, and the other thing I wanted to say is Washington State is a top 2 primary. So what we have to do is to get voters to recognize that we're not even necessarily trying to take Larsen off of the top post with this effort. We want to be on the ballot next to him and to tell them, look at the way he messaged in the last cycle. It was all anti-Trump. He completely ignored any policy positions. If you put us on the ballot next to him, he has to address policy issues, which he has never had to do before. And I think that is one of the key points of our messaging to voters in the district is, do you want to have policy conversations, or are you willing to take the lowest bar that is possible for a Democrat? We are a D+10 district. This is a solidly blue district that is in no danger of going into Republican hands. And so the best case scenario for voters in this district is to have 2 Democrats going against each other, one corporate, one foot in, 1 foot out of the Democratic Party to the left. I mean, I'll be honest about it.
Yeah. So
and have those policy conversations.
So to wrap up our conversation, I want to ask you a personal question about what it's like to be a candidate. What are the things that have been frankly challenging, and be honest about that? I'm sure number one is fundraising. But what's it been like as a candidate? And if you can say something about what it's like to be a candidate, especially in this time during the pandemic, what's been different?
We were really hampered by COVID last year. The presidential primary in Washington was March 10th. COVID essentially shut us down on March 15th. We had put a lot of effort. My campaign team, we're all sort of DSA Bernie types. We really wanted to help Bernie get a win here in Washington State. So we put a lot of our focus into Bernie's campaign rather than our own campaign. And then at the point where we were about to hit the streets for our own field plan, we got locked down. So we were definitely impacted by that. It's important to have funding, but it's also important to have great tech people. And I do have great tech people on my team. I have, obviously you've seen, I've got great research people. And so I've got a really good team to deal with the challenges presented by COVID, the fact that we can't, but we are going to get out into the streets. I went to West Virginia to help with Paula Jean's campaign. I went to Delaware to help with Jessica Rain's campaign. We did on the ground door knocking there. You can do it safely. You can do it socially distanced. And it's still the best way to have those personal conversations with people about the candidate and about policies. We do plan to do that in district this year. We're not going to, keep everything online.
And optimistically, assuming things go as they are going now with vaccinations, and if we can keep the variants under control, and if we can shut Rand Paul up so he stops promoting the idea that you can run around without a mask, potentially by the fall, you'll be able to campaign a little bit more loosely out in the streets, actually go back to the retail politics of engaging people out there in the community. Thanks for being with us on the show, and we'll keep up with you as your campaign progresses. Good luck.
Appreciate it so much, Jonathan. Thank you.